Well, this is Dateline News and Conversation. Going to be talking about the MOU. Is it dead in the water? Going to be talking about um, Israel. They don't appear to be honoring the first article of the MOU, which is the complete ceasefire in Lebanon by Israel. We're going to talk about this tonight with a good friend. Um, She has been covering the Middle East for the CIA since 1991. She lived in the Middle East in Jordan for 2 years. Um, let me introduce and welcome back to the show Elizabeth Murray. Elizabeth, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Regis. It's always good to be with you.
Okay, so I wanted to establish your background and credibility. Having worked in the CIA since 1991, your job was to cover the Middle East, the media, the newspapers uh, for the United States of America. So, as much as anybody, uh, you have a pretty good idea of what's been going on in the Middle East, the balance of power, etc. Let me start by asking this question, Elizabeth. Um, Israel was created by Great Britain. I don't even like to call it great, just the UK or London or just England. And it was created as a beachhead in the Middle East, basically to counter any of the other countries in the region in terms of influence, power, and it was all about oil. Um, Now, Israel has been in the news many times since its creation. It's had several wars. It has basically been unrestrained when it comes to expanding its power and its influence. People today and have been talking about the Greater Israel Project and how far that extends. So, first of all, I'd like you to reflect with me and for me and the audience, Elizabeth, on how you personally, since 1991, have seen the influence of Israel in the Middle East.
Uh, in the Middle East, Israel has had a very um, interesting and colorful role. Obviously, there were many wars since its inception. Big ones, of course, in 1967 and 1973. And later on, there were normalization pacts with Egypt. And of course, now we have the Abraham Accords, but its presence has been very problematic of late. It has had good relations with some of the Gulf states, particularly the United Arab Emirates and also Saudi Arabia. And then, of course, there was the normalization with Jordan, which I believe happened in the middle 1990s. So there's sort of what you might call the cold peace in Israel with, Egypt and Jordan. But it has to be said that, Israel, as we currently see it, could not possibly survive without the many billions of dollars. I mean, technically, I think it's $3.5 billion that the United States just gives it outright every year, plus untold millions and even billions in other kinds of military aid. So Israel is is a country of immigrants, mainly from Eastern Europe, but also from Russia and Jews that migrated from Iraq and Morocco and other areas in the Middle East. and just basically sat there on top of Palestinians, and of course massacred and expelled many of them since the Nakba, I believe 800,000 in 1948, and then now we're seeing what's going on in Gaza. And there's of course, there's a Gaza-style ethnic cleansing happening right now in Lebanon. I believe that since March, this March, when Hezbollah entered the war on the side of Iran, I believe that Israel has killed almost 4,000 Lebanese people mainly in the south of Lebanon, in the area that it wishes to ethnically cleanse and permanently occupies, and has displaced, I think, 1.5 million people. So they're essentially trying to realize their greater dream of greater Israel, which they called Eretz Yisrael, which is, ironically, they use the term that they forbid the pro-Palestinian camp to use, which is from the river to the sea, from the Nile to the Euphrates River is where they would like to establish their Lebensraum state. So,
Okay. Let me ask you this. If you were delivering the daily CIA briefing to the president, and by the way, I don't think he even gets briefed by the CIA. He gets briefed by Jared Kushner and whoever else is in that primary circle. What would you say to him if you were the last person that could whisper in his ear on February 28th? What would you have said?
I would have advised him not to go into a war that has almost no U.S. national interest involved in it. This was a war for Israel. This was a war for Israeli interests. And I don't know what kind of pressures were brought on to the president to have him make that decision. But I am quite sure that there were papers put in front of him advising him not to do it. And he chose not to listen. Obviously, as you said, I mean, I think, unfortunately, rather than listening to intelligence professionals and people seasoned in politics, he prefers to listen to his son-in-law and to his business or real estate friend, Steve Witkoff, who, by the way, are now being insulted in Israel for helping to promote this latest deal with Iran. Israel is now insulting every U.S. official that was involved with that. But yeah, and I have to say that whoever whispered in Trump's ear most recently obviously informed him about the world economic situation that has been occasioned by this blockage of the Strait of Hormuz. And I think he has seen the light in terms of what needed to be done. Now, whether this can hold, this agreement or MOU, it's not really an agreement. Is a big question, as many other pundits have said, and I agree with them. This isn't really an agreement, Regis. This is simply a basic commitment to keep talking, which I guess is something, you know.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Um, it's a pathway to
Right.
a possible peace in the Middle East. Um, I'm very doubtful and very skeptical that it's going to go anywhere. Uh, I think primarily because of Israel. They have flat out said they're not going to agree to it. I'm just hearing just a little while ago, as you mentioned offline, that maybe Hezbollah and Israel have agreed to a ceasefire beginning sometime today. We'll see how long that holds. Um, but I want to get back to Trump and what your thoughts were over the was like March, April, May, and now we're into June. So over 3 months, um, Trump kept boasting that we're destroying them. They don't have any more army. They don't have any more navy. They don't have any more air force. They got no more missiles. And I'm going to blow them back to the Stone Age. Meanwhile, as you mentioned, Iran had the United States and the rest of the world by the neck, the chokehold that is, and everybody knows now, unless you're asleep and you haven't been paying any attention, the Straits of Hormuz. Now, you're talking about Trump maybe seeing the light. Um, it gets back to it's the economy, stupid. Uh, you mentioned, and I don't think Trump is all that, he's not very bright. He's vulgar. He's not articulate. Um, but if he understands one thing, it's money. And he understands that as president of the United States, it is the economy, stupid. Now, I'm going to want you to comment on that because you mentioned that the economy in the United States and around the world is in a very shaky position, to say the least. Uh, Start off, Elizabeth, because you're in the United States. You're on the East Coast now. Um, Whenever I have an American friend on, I always ask this question because it's really impossible for me to see where I'm sitting in Yalta, in the Crimea of the Russian Federation, what Americans are really feeling. Now, Elizabeth, I'm going to preface this by what I observe. American sports arenas are filled to capacity. Basketball playoffs just finished, absolutely full. Madison Square Garden for the New York Knicks, who won it. Baseball stadiums. Uh, Football will start up here in the fall, and college and professional. And those stadiums will be filled to capacity. And then I'm hearing that, oh, wow, Americans are really feeling it at the gas pump, at the supermarket. Elizabeth, is the economy really that bad? And what direction is it going in before we start talking about Trump's awakening?
That's a very interesting observation you just made. I myself, I'm not into following sports, but I do know a little bit about the economy. As you said, I'm here on the East Coast, but I'm normally based on the West Coast, and homelessness is rife. And it's so sad. It's even here, where I have seen on the streets, it's normal now. It never was before to see people on every street corner holding up a cardboard sign, explaining why they need people to put money, in their alms cup or whatever. Um, I think the disparity there's the middle class is definitely shrinking in this country, and the disparity in incomes is becoming much more pronounced. There's no question about that. The fact that you say the stadiums are full interests me greatly because often when people fall on hard times, they will even spend money they don't have for distractions, for spectacle. And this might have been some of the rationale that Trump had to stage this sort of very vulgar, fight or wrestling or whatever right there at the White House. But when people, especially Americans who love sports, when people fall on hard times, they often rely on spectacle and they might shell out and money that would better be spent on food or whatever to distract themselves and their families from the reality that they see around them. And I think that's one of the reasons that this sports mentality, or almost a sports religion, exists in the United States. um, People, it is some people's religion, that you see that what they wear, and the colors and all that. And I went into a bank the other day and they had these football helmets with the colors of the team. I mean, sports to me in this country, is at a very strange level in society. But I think that's one, for the psychiatrists. But yeah, ironically, the gas prices at the pumps here on the East Coast, where I'm at in Northern Virginia, are actually several dollars less than over in California. And I don't know why that is or what that is, but there must be some artificial effort to keep prices down. Because what I'm understanding is that even in the best of circumstances, if this memorandum of understanding with Trump goes through, even if it holds, even if Israel decides, not to attack South Lebanon for a while. And by the way, I should stress, just because they've said they will have a ceasefire. There is this news of the agreement with Hezbollah. Israelis have also declared that they are not withdrawing from South Lebanon, which we probably need to discuss more of. But the poverty in this country is there. It's a little bit hidden. I think hunger is a quiet thing, but food banks are everywhere. The price of food in this country is ridiculous. I mean, I go to the supermarket and I wonder how people who have, sort of a job like a teacher, or if you have a cleaning job, or maybe you're even holding 3 jobs down, how can you feed your family and pay the bills? Prices are astronomical. So I can vouch for that from where I'm sitting right now.
You think it's the same thing across the country? Right,
Absolutely.
you do.
Oh,
I want to talk now a little bit about sports because I'm the one that brought it up. Um, you, you made a very good point. It's bread and circuses all over again, just like back during the Roman Empire. The people were suffering badly, but boy, they were showing up in the Colosseum for bloodbaths, and I absolutely agree that uh, sports has become the national religion. Um, Professional football, typically held on Sunday, has become the liturgy. When you look at it, with all the elements of liturgy, uh, James Kavanaugh was a Catholic priest. Uh, he, I think, he is the first one that I can recall that ever talked about it. And whether he wrote a book about it, it was just something he said that sport, and especially football, is a national religion. Um, it is the great distractor. Um, it's your tribe against another tribe, and you live that every day of the week. You're following the news about your favorite team every single day. You're going to the sport pages rather than going to, well, I don't want to see the main pages of the newspaper because that's all basically propaganda. But it is powerful, and I think it's one of the things that Americans are using to escape from the reality that's happening on Main Street and the reality that's happening in the world. Now, I want to, and then you mentioned the cage fighting last Sunday on Donald Trump's birthday at this arena that he had constructed on the south lawn of the White. I mean, the south lawn used to be where the other presidents had Easter egg hunts for children on Easter Sunday. And here he's got this, I don't even know what to call it because I don't follow it, but it's apparently the most savage form of fighting, not just between men, but between women now. And it's bloodlust. People want to see one or the other just get, well, maybe get killed. I don't know. At least being, I don't even know how to describe it. All right. I want to continue talking now about Donald Trump and waking up, as you said. Um, he certainly hasn't woken up about what's happening to all the people that he killed in Iran. He bragged about it. Um, the children in Minab were 170 something children, and their teachers were wiped out immediately by several U.S., I think they were Tomahawk missiles. No remorse about that. No remorse about Palestine, Gaza. No remorse about the thousands of people, as you mentioned, that Israel is killing now in Lebanon, the southern part of Lebanon. He's never showed any remorse, even for the people of the United States that you just talked about that are suffering because of the economy. So here's my question. Um, do you think he really cares about the people in the United States when he cares about the economy, when he's looking at the next election? Do you think he really cares what happens to people other than him, his shyster Zionist mafia crowd around him? Uh, what are your thoughts? I know I'm speaking really harshly, but that's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, I think that Donald Trump, you know, cares about Donald Trump. And if there are some people that happen to benefit from his maneuvers to save his political future, that would just be by accident. No, I think he has a survivor instinct. He does what is best for Donald, and I think that's the bottom line. I think he actually stated publicly at one point when a reporter asked him, well, what about the inflation? I think he even said some strange thing like, I love inflation. Um, you know, so, you really have to wonder where, where his mind is at. But no, this is all about his own political survival. I think that he was probably informed of long-term consequences for his election prospects if he did not do a deal with Iran. And it's interesting that you mentioned earlier that he uh, I'm trying to think what you said, that something about he bragged about totally destroying Iraq's ballistic missiles. And now I think in Europe, when he was asked about Iran's ballistic missiles at the Group of Seven conference, he even actually said something to the effect that, well, if Saudi Arabia has ballistic missiles, it's not fair if Iran doesn't have
Wow.
ballistic missiles. He's talking a different game now, Regis. And as you said earlier, he said, oh, we have to, demand total surrender from Iran or else. And as you know, many of the pundits that you and I know and respect, I think Dmitry Lascaris is among them. I mean, are characterizing this MOU as a basic total capitulation to Iran. I mean, it was set up to me. I think I was, obviously I'm not in the Middle East, so I rely on hearing journalists who either are reporting on the ground or who are close to those who are, because obviously you can't listen to any of the propaganda from the establishment mainstream media. You won't get the straight story. But what from what I understand is, in one of Israel's last attacks on Lebanon, Iran was prepared to hammer Israel, and Trump begged them not to. And that's
Yeah.
where concessions were made, and that was sort of the point of no return. And we can't underestimate what this MOU symbolizes, Regis, whether or not it goes through. This is a sea change in the power dynamics in the Middle East. I think it's very clear that we have to acknowledge that Iran now has a new position, because no matter what happens, they will continue to control the Straits of Hormuz. You can call what they're going to collect from the ships. You can call it, if you don't want to call it a toll, they're going to call it an administrative fee or whatever. But this is a sea change, Regis. The United States has capitulated and has basically acknowledged that Iran is the new superpower. It is not Saudi Arabia anymore in the Middle East. It's certainly not Israel, which has now just agreed with Hezbollah to even just a symbolic ceasefire. And what of course this really means is that it's giving them time to rearm, and it's giving the MOU is giving the United States a pause to take a deep breath and find out where it is. But everything has changed, including Israel's status in the United States. I don't care how much they try to censor or repress the pro-Palestine voices in the United States. Israel is in a deep hole, and they're not coming out of it. The days of pro-Israel cheerleading in the United States among the public is over. The vast majority of young American Jews believe that Israelis and Palestinians need to coexist side by side in a single state. All of this is the MOU is really just icing on this cake of change. There's so much that is never going to go back to the way it was before. And that's something that we could even discuss in another session. What are the deep implications of this for the power dynamics in the Middle East? Because the other thing that Regis that I want to mention is that Iran took a lot of bombing and a lot of punishment, and yet United States did not achieve the regime change. They did not achieve any sort of change in what Iran is doing on the nuclear front, and they were not able to, change the goals that Israel had for basically replacing the Iranian regime with a friendly pro-Israel regime. None of that has happened. People don't understand the implications of that, and it may not be immediate, but and then the other thing that our friend Dimitri Lascaris has talked about, and I don't know if he mentioned this on your show, and Israel is quiet about it, is the mass exodus, the mass brain drain from Israel. I think a lot of Israelis understand that the game is up there. And whether Bibi goes out and Naftali Bennett goes in, I mean, I think a lot of Israelis that are, thinking about the future of their children, their families, they're not going to wait around to see what Naftali Bennett is going to do vis-a-vis Iran. I mean, he's already spoken out saying, I'm going to be I'm going to be Iran's worst nightmare. He's been making all these bombastic statements. Um, you know, I don't think that Israel is a safe place for Jews or for people of any nationality. In fact, it's probably the world's unsafest place now that Iran has taken off the gloves and said, we are now going to use disproportionate responses to any further Israeli attacks on southern Lebanon. So everything's changed.
Yeah, I want to start with this last piece, uh, how unpopular Israel has become in the United States, around the world. It is now considered a pariah by almost everybody. The other thing that you mentioned, and you mentioned my good friend Dimitri Lastakaris, who's a regular on my show, um, is as long ago as a year or 2 years, he'd been visiting the Middle East from Syria, Lebanon, uh, Iran, Jordan, and even Israel. He predicted back then that the Israeli economy was crumbling, that they had no chance of surviving in the future. He just reiterated that the other day in another show. So, your point about the out migration of Israelis out of Israel, tens of thousands. And Dmitry was saying that thousands of them are going to Greece, to Crete. My friend in Thailand has been saying that Jews are all over there buying up real estate, um, even in Ukraine. It's reported that there are Jews that basically have great influence or control in part of Ukraine, and that may be part of the Greater Israel Project. Now, that said, I want to get back to the MOU. Elizabeth, I don't want to get into the 14 points. I'm sure you have analyzed them completely. I have, and I'm not a lawyer, but I've looked at those 14 points, and the fact that Donald Trump agreed to them, not as a deal, but as a memorandum of understanding, the groundwork from moving forward, if we keep talking, represents to me a complete capitulation, an admission that the United States lost. The other part of this, Elizabeth, that I want you to comment on, Iran was incredibly strategically brilliant by not just attacking Israel, but all of America's military and space and radar installations all over the Middle East. Nobody survived that. That was brilliant. But I'd like you to start. You could go any way you want with this. Do you think that the United States will now be forced to pull out militarily from the Middle East? Because I don't think any of these countries that hosted, harbored American military installations, thinking they were safe, now know that America couldn't protect them. What are your thoughts?
Well, Regis, very good point. And in fact, indeed, um, many of the installations in the Gulf countries, especially like the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, but also in the United Arab Emirates and elsewhere, they have been forced to evacuate. This has not made it into the mainstream US press, but they've been obliterated by Iranian attacks. And I think that's basically forcing the Gulf states to reevaluate their relationship with the United States and ask themselves, is this the horse that we want to bet on? Is this who is going to be the next major power and influencer? It's forcing them to talk to Iran. It's forcing these states that were so beholden to the U.S. to pivot now, because I think that what you predict is right, that eventually the U.S. will have to completely draw down. I don't think they're or have a very minimal presence, perhaps in countries like Jordan that receive large amounts of U.S. assistance. I think Jordan receives about the same as Israel. I think $1.5 billion a year, and basically the U.S. props up that regime, which is rather corrupt and very much in the pocket of the United States and its policies. But the Gulf countries are going to start pivoting towards Iran and reevaluating, because they've seen, I think the worst insult to them is that the U.S., there were supposed to be mutual defense pacts. Did the United States defend the integrity of those countries when U.S. bases came under attack? Absolutely not. They cut and they ran, basically. So what has transpired in the Middle East, I think, is a lesson for the whole world. I mean, no doubt China is drawing lessons from this with regard to Tehran. The Russians have sat back and watched, and I think they're basically leaning back and saying, we're just watching the U.S. destroy itself. We don't have to do anything. Look at this. It's a spectacle to them. But certainly, the power dynamics in the Middle East will change, and I think the U.S. has lost a great deal of respect. And the myth that it is there to protect others probably was not lost on the NATO countries either.
Yeah.
It's a lesson for the world, Regis.
Uh, I couldn't agree with you more. Uh, I want to go back, and you talk about the U.S. losing respect, and Trump, if he ever had any respect, he probably was feared by everybody, but that's not respect. That's like, yeah, there's a rabid dog. I'm afraid of that dog. I'm not going to go near it, but does that mean I respect it? I respect the fact that it can do real harm to me. And I think that's how the rest of the world has viewed Trump. I don't think too many people trust him. You mentioned some of the comments that he made at the G7. Elizabeth, I saw several video reports and clips in the blogosphere. Uh, he made statements like you mentioned. Well, other countries have ballistic missiles, so it's only right that Iran should have ballistic missiles. And by the way, that nuclear dust, well, they should have a right to have their own nuclear power for electricity, domestic purposes. I mean, all of this rhetoric has shifted 180 degrees, where he talked about wanting to to bomb them back into the Stone Age. Now they really have a right to exist, and we have to talk to them, and maybe we'll make deals with them. I mean, he's so contradictory, even in the same sentences. The other thing, and I want to ask you about Trump before we go on. Um, you said something that I don't remember if you mentioned this before we went on the air or in the interim, uh, that the Iranians decided to use psychiatrists, psychologists,
Mm.
to analyze Trump's behavior in dealing with him. Can you clarify that a little? Can you expand a little bit more on that? Because I'm not surprised. I'm sure they did.
Oh, Regis, you're going to have to repeat that last question because I understood you started with the fact that the Iranians have used psychologists and psychiatrists to evaluate Trump's personality as they negotiate with him. But the last part of what you were saying what was cut off to me. So can you clarify your question again?
I think it was brilliant. That was basically it. What I mean, I think they got him figured out, and I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about the genius, the brilliance of that, which they weren't going to go boom boom head to head directly with the United States, uh, but basically they analyzed him. They analyzed his, I think, his intellectual capacity. They analyzed his behavior, which a lot of people have been doing, by the way, and they came to some conclusions that enable them to win this. I just wanted you to talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I was fascinated when I saw that report, and it is, citing, Iranian officials. I mean, this is the case that they did use it, but obviously they've had some success with learning about what makes Donald Trump tick. And I wanted just to add, Regis, that interested me also because within the Central Intelligence Agency, there is a large psychology department. And among the leadership analysts in the Central Intelligence Agency, one of the most important jobs that they have is to provide a psychological profile of leaders, particularly those that the United States wants to influence. So I want you to know that this is standard operating procedure in our own country and in how we deal with particular leaders. What do they particularly like, even down to their hobbies, what are their favorite beverages, and these are all ways that this is all information that they use to influence the people that they want to influence. So I just thought I would make that observation.
Well, I think it's a great observation because even someone like me, who has probably done a little more research on the CIA than most average Americans. I mean, Ray McGovern has been a good friend for many years. Uh, Doug Valentine, who wrote the book The CIA as Organized Crime, was a brilliant book. I spent 2 days with him at his home in Weston, Massachusetts, interviewing him in 2018 or 2019. And I was so horrified by what he told me. I asked him, Doug, how are you still alive? And he said, well, they just, they, uh, they torched my book in the New York Times They ruined my career, and that was it. I was sidelined. But um, in my research of the CIA, um, I didn't. I guess maybe I didn't know that they had a special bureau or office that just worked on the psychology analysis of foreign leaders. But I knew that. I knew that they were doing it. Um, so it's kind of interesting that Iran turned the tables on them. You know, they're an ancient civilization. Uh, it would have been a crime against all of humanity to have destroyed the history, the culture, uh, the historic places of Iran. It would have been probably one of the most horrible things that the United States or any country could have done throughout history.
Well,
Destroy.
it could still happen, Regis. It could still happen.
Uh, yeah, no, I agree with you. But where I wanted to go with this was uh, before I transition onto something else, which is far more serious, in my opinion. Um, Donald Trump, as a an object of psychological observation, he has been described as a malignant narcissist, an, a megalomaniac. He has been described as loose and unconnected. Uh, he has been described as incoherent, contradictory, um, inconsistent in everything. And when you think about somebody like that, and having a loose tongue, by the way, uh, being the president of maybe previously the most powerful, the most wealthy country in the world, it's frightening. It's really frightening. And Elizabeth, if there's one thing that bothers me the most, is how the American public over the last year and a half, and you have to go back to his first term as well, how they can remain silent in the face of this imbecile, and how they could have elected him in that election if it was fair and whatever. Supposedly, almost 70% of the vote went to Trump. I can't believe it. I've lost all respect for many of my friends. They've lost respect for me. They don't talk to me anymore. My family doesn't talk to me. Um, I just don't know how Americans can put up with this. I just don't. Anyway, um, I want to go on to something a whole lot more serious.
If I could just
Elizabeth.
jump in one last comment before we do. It's the mercurial or contradictory and unpredictable nature of Trump is interesting in the sense that we've seen him swing wildly, and but it could actually be for the good if he actually does decide that it's essential for his survival to maintain the peace. Because in that scenario, then the United States would distance itself from Israel. I mean, if Trump and his administration really decide that Israel is too big of an albatross around his neck and that it's going to bring Trump down with it, to me, that leaves open um, possibilities that might not exist with people who were sort of more consistently pro-Israel. Trump's unpredictability really is a wild card in every sense. But that's all I wanted to just throw that in.
Um, I you mentioned maybe he's come to the conclusion that Israel is an albatross around his neck and around the United States. I want to finish with that. What the consequences of that might be. But before that, I want to go to how Trump has tried to shift his attention to Ukraine. Because, he's been bragging about ending that war and bringing peace, but he's shown no concrete examples of his willingness to end that because he continues to arm Israel directly or indirectly. Uh, Israel is not the one that is firing hundreds of drones and missiles deep into Russia and into Crimea, where I live. It's the United States, it's UK, it's France, and it's Germany that are doing this. They can't do it without American uh, satellite intelligence and coordination. They can't do it. So Trump is going to send his two gangster mafia emissaries, Witkoff and Kushner, back to Russia. Now, a lot of us have been raising the question, why on earth is Russia, Putin, receiving those two with open arms, apparently, uh, with his Putin's primary guy, Kirill Dmitriev, who wasn't born and raised in America, but he was educated there at Stanford and at Harvard, worked for big banks. He understands America inside and out. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if there's another Russian that probably knows more about the United States than Dmitriev. And, I've been wondering all along, why is Sergei Lavrov, Russia's longtime a statesman in the world that really has no peer, why is he not talking diplomatically with whatever's left of diplomats in the United States about restoring US Russia relations? It's not on the table. I don't know what your thoughts are. The only thing that I can come to is that Putin and the people around him, and I include Lavrov in this, it's better to keep talking even if it's not going anywhere. Those two guys are not interested in peace. They're interested in mega business deals with Russia's vast resources, gas, oil, rare earth minerals, uh, Trump property on the Black Sea right here in Crimea. Uh, they're not interested in peace, and that's not what's happening. So, would you agree with me that Russia, and particularly Putin, has been playing to Trump's weaknesses, have been playing to Trump's need to be patronized? Oh, Donald, happy birthday. Putin was the first and maybe the only one who called him up to wish him a happy birthday. Oh, Donald is really sincere about working for peace. It's like people are saying that's a bunch of crap. Putin can't believe that stuff. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that the Russians have got a psychological profile on Donald Trump like maybe nobody else?
Well, no doubt that's true, Regis. And also, I think that the Russians have probably just thrown their hands up in disgust and are sort of playing for time. Yes, let's talk to these mafia gangsters if the Americans don't want to send us anyone else to talk to. It's an insult to send people like that. I mean, imagine such a serious interlocutor as Lavrov, as the Russian state, another superpower, and they send a, a real estate crony of Trump's and his son-in-law. I mean, it's as if there's, and actually that's a point that should be made, Regis. Professional diplomacy in this administration is dead. I'm sure you've heard about the huge purge at the State Department of professional diplomats. Their their talents, their long years of service on behalf of the U.S. government are not appreciated, and they've just been summarily dismissed. And I think half the world has empty ambassador positions. The Russians may have concluded that there is no one now in the United States that they can talk to, so they're just going to, you know, engage in this little kabuki theater until they find serious interlocutors, and it may not happen in this administration. But really, the state, it speaks to the state of American diplomacy that if we cannot even talk to another great power, and a nuclear power at that, and such a critical um, partner as Russia that we do need to keep talking to. that's very dangerous. And it seems like, unfortunately, as far as the war with Ukraine is concerned, I mean, it's just unfortunately the endless war thing. And of course, politically for NATO, it's their bogeyman of choice because their economies are falling apart. NATO is a wreck, and it's so easy for them to just, okay, look at Germany building up their military to face the so-called, fictitious Russian threat. What's happening in Europe is really very concerning, and I'm sure Russia is very concerned about it too. I mean, they should be holding peace talks with Russia, and bringing things back to normal. But instead, they're whipping up this sort of level of fascism and mass hysteria that we've not seen, for many many years. Going way back. It's very disappointing to see the political situation in Germany right now, especially. And the fascism word, the F word, is there throughout Europe.
Um, it's very insulting to Russia, to China, to send these people and a bunch of billionaire uh, transnational corporation CEOs to China and no diplomats. It's terribly insulting to these two countries. I'm just talking about the two powerful countries that are opposing the United States right now. I'm not talking about Europe. I don't care much about what they're doing. I do care a lot about what they're doing, but they're insane. They're incompetent, etc. But as you mentioned, there are no more diplomats in the State Department. As you mentioned, they got rid of all of them. So they've lost all that um, experience, all that knowledge, that I don't know if you want to call it a science of diplomacy, but I think you probably could call it a science of diplomacy, is gone. And so when you send two goons to Russia to talk, well, that's what they are. They're goons. Just like mafia, you know, guys, that they're not the hitmen pulling the trigger, but they're the guys that are going over there using the muscle. Let's face it. So I think we agree that Russia, China, and Iran have figured out it's better to keep talking to them because they're still dangerous. It's better to keep talking and placating Donald Trump with words and flattery than to risk the alternative. You mentioned it's still possible that the United States and Israel could wipe Iran off the face of the earth. Now, with the time we have left, I want to come to something nobody's talking about except Trump. He bragged openly again at the G7. I eliminated their leadership, the first two levels of their leadership. I killed Soleimani. I ordered him. We tracked him. We knew what he was going to be doing. We knew what plane he was going to be on. We knew when he was going, and I killed him. Now we're talking about extrajudicial killing. The United States has been freaking great at that. Barack Obama bragged about it at his Tuesday meetings. He enjoyed killing, identifying civilians in Iraq or in Pakistan or in Afghanistan. Extrajudicial killings. I mean, who the hell do they think we are? But Trump just bragged about killing Khomeini, killing the next level of leadership, and killing Soleimani. Now, who's the best at these assassinations? It's Israel. They've done it everywhere. They brag about it. They've taken out people in Syria. They've taken out people in Lebanon. They've taken out people in Iraq. Uh, they were part and parcel of Trump being able to take out the top leadership in Iran. Elizabeth, what Trump just did publicly to either hang Israel out to dry or throw them under the bus, to have embarrassed Bibi publicly with a profanity laced diatribe using the F bomb several times. Elizabeth, I don't know. But if I were Donald Trump, if I had any idea of what Israel has done and is capable of doing, I'd be really concerned about watching my back. What are your thoughts?
Well, we did have a president who tried to rein in Israel's nuclear program. His name was John F. Kennedy, and he was summarily assassinated. Um, Israel was one of the players, and I don't doubt. Although Kennedy also had many enemies in the establishment who hated him for trying to make peace with the Russians, for trying to make peace with Cuba, and he was viscerally hated by J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI. So I think, but I don't rule out that Israel was part of that conspiracy. And I think actually President Obama alluded to that. I have this from an anecdote that Ray McGovern has told more than once, that somebody asked Obama why he wasn't going through with many of the things that he had promised to do in his administration. And Obama said something to the effect that, well, we all know what happened to Kennedy. So, this is always a risk that an American president takes, especially when he goes off the reservation a little bit and doesn't do what his handlers tell him to do. So, it's anybody's guess what's going to happen with the leadership of this administration if they go off the reservation when it comes to Israel. Now, the likelihood of that happening is, to me, still. I mean, I still think that the Israelis hold some Epstein tapes on Trump that he's worried about. Trump has an election coming up. Um, the APAC vote is very important to him, that sort of thing. So, but what's new in this dynamic is the Iranian promise to launch overwhelmingly disproportionate retaliation on Israel should it resume bombing in Lebanon. And the Iranians are true to their word. If they say they're going to do that, they will. Um, and if 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 United States gives Iran carte blanche to go after Israel and does not defend Israel, um, yes, I think that certainly political careers may be in danger, and possibly lives. We've seen. Look at the assassination of Charlie Kirk, which happened right after he began to distance himself from Israel. I mean, there are a lot of people sort of lower on the totem pole that have paid with their lives for betraying Israel, in their opinion. So,
You know, Tucker Carlson has come out, probably as, and Candace Owens, but Tucker Carlson, extremely powerful, has millions and millions of followers. He's an influencer if there's ever been one. He has really turned against Israel, Trump's support of Israel, etc. And I thought, and I occasionally watch some of his shows, and I think in some things he's really great. On other things, I don't very much support him. But I thought, man, his life is in danger. He's hiding away somewhere up in Maine, not far from where I was born, in a a really nice little resort cabin. But I thought he's in danger, um, because of what happened to Charlie Kirk, and I don't think there's any doubt that Israel is the one that did that. I am a Nobody else is talking about this. I don't have a crystal ball, but the first thing I thought of when Trump blasted Bibi, used the F bomb on him, and since has been pressuring Israel to stop the bombing in Lebanon. I then thought Trump is a dead man walking. He is not going to survive, uh, maybe even to the election, because I don't think Israel fools around. You look at the history of political assassinations. Uh, I just, I'm really troubled by it. I think Trump maybe have crossed the Israeli Rubicon. And this MOU, when you read it, and if you try to read it from the point of view as an Israeli in Israel, that's a death sentence. Anyway, Elizabeth, you have any final comments before we wrap it up? It's been fascinating conversation as always.
Thank you very much. I would just say that what if Israel decides to take out an American leader, I think that might have a backlash. And I don't know if that would change American public opinion about Israel, which is, as you know, is at a record low right now. I think that the sea change will go beyond individual lives. We've seen this happen in Iran, where they decapitated the Iranian leader, and now the Iran is stronger than ever. And the same could happen in our country.
Elizabeth, we're going to have to wait and watch and see what happens. There's a lot of analysis going on by everybody about what's going to happen in these next few days. I want to just sit back and wait and watch and see how this unfolds. And we have to stay in touch, because I'm going to want to come back and discuss going forward what what will have happened, what might happen, and then again, Elizabeth, whether Russia will learn anything from this example in Iran. Thanks so much for coming on the show. It's great to see you again. Enjoy your time as much as you can on the East Coast, and then get back to the West Coast and enjoy life. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Regis. Good to be with you again. Thanks for having me.